The alien reconnaissance vessel floated quietly in the dark side of Earth's moon. The ship was designed to be completely invisible to Earth's primitive radar systems. Commander Yoon sat in his command chair, all four of his eyes focused on the large holographic screen that showed the beautiful blue planet below. His tall, slender frame barely moved as he studied the latest data from their 3-month observation mission. The ship's interior was kept at a cool temperature that suited the scaled bodies of his crew. The soft purple lighting helped them see better while keeping their energy consumption low. Around him, his crew worked at their stations, each monitoring different aspects of Earth and its inhabitants. "Commander," Research Officer Han called out, her purple scales catching the light as she turned to face him. "I need you to see this." Her voice carried a mix of confusion and worry that made Yoon's scales tingle with concern. Han's fingers danced across her holographic controls, bringing up multiple data streams on the main screen. "Look at these readings from their industrial centers," she said, pointing to one set of data. "They're still heavily dependent on burning fossil fuels. Their vehicles, their power plants, even their heating systems, all running on crude oil and coal." Yoon nodded. This matched their initial assessment of Earth as a developing world. But then Han swiped to another screen, and Yoon's 4 eyes widened in surprise. "Now look at this," she continued. "We've detected quantum entanglement experiments happening in multiple locations around their planet. They're not just theoretical calculations, they're actually manipulating quantum states with remarkable precision." The commander leaned forward in his chair. "Show me more," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Han brought up more data. "They're using smartphones with more computing power than our first interstellar ships had. They're developing artificial intelligence systems that are approaching sentience. Yet, at the same time, they're still fighting wars with primitive projectile weapons and struggling to handle basic waste management." "Impossible," Yoon muttered, but the evidence was right there on the screen. He stood up and walked closer to the display, his long fingers tracing the data streams in the air. "How can they be so advanced in some areas and so primitive in others? It defies all known patterns of technological development." The ship's senior analyst, Officer Park, joined them at the main screen. "Sir, it gets even stranger," he said, pulling up his own data. "Their scientific progress isn't following any logical pattern we've ever seen. They're making breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics while still struggling to cure common diseases. They've mapped their own genome, but haven't eliminated poverty. They can split atoms but can't predict their own weather accurately." Yoon paced the bridge, his tail swishing back and forth in agitation. In all his years of studying developing civilizations, he'd never seen anything like this. Every other species they'd encountered had followed a predictable path of technological advancement. First came basic tools, then agriculture, then industrialization, followed by digital technology, and finally quantum sciences. Each step built logically on the ones before it. But humans were different. They seemed to jump randomly between technological levels, making incredible advances in some areas while remaining stubbornly primitive in others. "Sir," Han spoke up again, her voice serious. "There's something else you should see." She brought up a new image on the screen, a human entertainment center called a theme park. They'd built massive structures purely for entertainment, where they deliberately exposed themselves to simulated danger for pleasure. They call it a roller coaster. Yoon watched in fascination as humans willingly strapped themselves into metal cars that hurtled them through the air at dangerous speeds. "Are they being forced to do this?" he asked. "No, sir," Han replied. "They pay money for the privilege. And look at this. They're smiling and screaming at the same time." The commander sank back into his chair, his mind racing. Everything they knew about technological advancement and species development seemed to be wrong when it came to humans. They were unpredictable, illogical, and possibly insane by his species' standards. "New protocol," he announced to his crew. "No direct contact under any circumstances. We need to gather more data before we even consider revealing ourselves to them." A species this unpredictable could be more dangerous than we initially thought. As the crew acknowledged his orders, Hume kept his eyes fixed on the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, billions of humans were going about their lives, simultaneously primitive and advanced, dangerous and fascinating. For the first time in his career, he felt something he'd never experienced before, genuine uncertainty about what a species might do next. The reconnaissance vessel continued its silent watch, hidden from Earth's view, while its crew tried to make sense of the puzzling creatures that called the blue planet home. Hashtag, the real reason aliens hide from Earth. Cultural anthropologist Lee had been studying humans for 6 months. His disguise was perfect. He looked just like a normal Korean man in his 30s, thanks to advanced holographic technology. His mission was simple: observe humans in their natural habitat without any interaction. He had done similar work on 12 other planets, and nothing bad had ever happened. Until today. Lee sat in a busy cafe in Seoul, pretending to work on his laptop while actually recording human behavior with his enhanced senses. The sweet and bitter smells in the air made him curious. Humans seemed to gather in these coffee shops all day long. They would sit for hours, drinking dark liquids from cups and staring at screens. To maintain his cover, Lee had always pretended to drink by lifting empty cups to his lips. But today, he made a terrible mistake. Lost in his observations, he accidentally picked up someone else's cup instead of his empty one. Before he realized what he was doing, he had swallowed a mouthful of something called an espresso. The effect was immediate and terrifying. His heart rate tripled in seconds. His internal temperature rose by 5 degrees. And worst of all, his species' natural bioluminescence began to activate. Blue lights started glowing under his skin. Panicking, Lee ran to the bathroom and locked himself in a stall. His holographic disguise was flickering as his body struggled with the powerful stimulant. Through his neural link, he sent an emergency signal to the medical team. "What's happening to me?" He whispered into his communicator, watching as his hands glowed bright blue through the failing hologram. 3 hours later, in the ship's medical bay, Lee sat on an examination table while Medical Officer Kim ran tests on his still trembling body. Commander Yoon and several other officers had gathered for the emergency briefing. "Let me understand this correctly," Kim said, looking at her readings in disbelief. "This coffee contains a substance called caffeine, and humans drink this willingly." "Yes," Lee replied, his voice shaky. "They drink it daily, sometimes multiple times per day. The one I accidentally consumed was something called an espresso, a concentrated form. Multiple times per day." Commander Yoon's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme surprise. "And this is normal behavior?" "Completely normal," Lee confirmed. "In fact, many humans say they can't function properly without it. They have something they call a morning coffee, which they drink immediately after waking up." Officer Han, who had been analyzing the chemical composition of the espresso, spoke up. "Commander, you need to see these readings. This substance would be classified as a dangerous stimulant on most civilized worlds. It increases heart rate, boosts brain activity, and can cause physical dependency. And humans give this to their young." Commander Yoon replied. "They usually wait until their offspring are teenagers. But here's the strange part. They have other versions of this drink specifically designed to appeal to younger humans. They call it hot chocolate or chocolate milk. It contains a similar but weaker stimulant." Medical Officer Kim pulled up a holographic display showing the effects of caffeine on Lee's biology. "Look at these readings. The substance triggered a complete fight-or-flight response in your system. That's why your bioluminescence activated. Your body thought it was under attack. But humans," Lee added, "they just sit there calmly while drinking it. Some even drink it to relax. I've observed humans drinking coffee while reading, working, or having casual conversations." Commander Yoon paced the medical bay, his tail twitching with concern. "So they've not only discovered a powerful stimulant, they've turned it into a social activity. They build entire establishments around its consumption. Yes, Lee nodded. And there's more. They mix it with other substances they call sugar and cream. They have dozens of different variations. Some drink it hot, some drink it cold. They've turned it into a kind of art form. The medical bay fell silent as everyone processed this information. Finally, Officer Hand spoke what they were all thinking. What kind of species deliberately consumes mind-altering substances as part of their daily routine? The same kind that jumps out of perfectly good aircraft for fun, Commander Yoon reminded them, referring to their earlier observations of human skydiving. Lee shuddered, both from the lingering effects of the caffeine and the memory of what he'd seen in the cafe. Commander, there's one more thing. While I was hiding in the bathroom, I heard two humans talking. One said they had already had 5 espressos that day. The other one didn't express concern. They just laughed and ordered another one. Commander Yoon made a note in his report. The more they learned about humans, the more mysterious and frightening they became. A species that casually consumed powerful stimulants, treated it as a social activity, and even celebrated it. What else were they capable of? Cultural anthropologist Lee, the commander said firmly, from now on, you will maintain strict non-interaction protocols. No more accidents. We can't risk another incident like this. Lee nodded eagerly, still glowing faintly blue. He had no desire to experience coffee ever again. As he left the medical bay, he could still hear the busy sounds of the cafe in his mind, and the cheerful way humans ordered their daily doses of what his species would consider a dangerous drug. The galaxy, it seemed, was not ready for a species that treated stimulants as a breakfast beverage. Hashtag, the real reason aliens hide from Earth. Analyst Park couldn't believe what he was seeing through the observation satellites. His tentacles tapped nervously on his console as he double-checked the readings. After confirming the data for the 3rd time, he knew he had to report it. Base Command, this recording needs immediate verification. Park transmitted, his voice shaking slightly. I'm observing humans deliberately jumping from high altitudes for entertainment purposes. Back at Observation Base Alpha, Commander Yoon and Officer Han gathered around the main viewing screen. The footage showed a small aircraft climbing to a dangerous height. Then, to their horror, the side door opened and humans started jumping out, one after another. Are they escaping a mechanical failure? Officer Han asked, her scales changing color with anxiety. No, Park replied. The aircraft is functioning perfectly. They're doing this voluntarily. They call it skydiving. Commander Yoon zoomed in on the footage. The humans were falling through the air, their bodies spread out like strange birds. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to be smiling. Show me more examples of this behavior, Yoon ordered, his 4 eyes narrowing with concentration. No, Lee. Park brought up more recordings. The next footage showed humans climbing up the sides of steep mountains. Some had safety equipment, but others were doing something even more shocking. This is called free solo climbing, Park explained, his tentacles curling in distress. They climb these vertical rock faces without any safety equipment at all. One wrong move means certain death. Officer Hand's scales turned pale. But why? What resources are they trying to reach? None, Park replied. They climb these mountains simply because they're there. They call it a challenge or a conquest. Some even describe it as fun. The next series of recordings showed more bewildering activities. Humans strapping boards to their feet and sliding down snow-covered mountains, riding waves on tiny platforms in dangerous oceans, and jumping off tall structures with elastic cords attached to their legs. The humans have names for all these activities, Park continued. Skiing, surfing, bungee jumping. They've created entire industries around these dangerous pursuits. They pay money to risk their lives. Commander Yoon watched as a human on a small board did a flip over a large ramp. Are these some kind of warriors training for combat? No, sir, Park answered. These are ordinary civilians. They have regular jobs and families. They do these activities in their free time. The command center fell silent as they watched more footage. Humans racing vehicles at deadly speeds, diving into underwater caves, jumping between tall buildings, and something particularly baffling called wingsuit flying, where they glided through the air in special suits. "Look at their vital signs," Officer Hand pointed out, studying the biological data. "Their bodies are releasing chemicals that indicate pleasure. They're actually enjoying this." "Correct," Park confirmed. "Their brains produce something called adrenaline during these activities. Many humans appear to be addicted to this sensation. They call themselves adrenaline junkies or thrill seekers." Commander Hume paced the room, his tail swishing in agitation. "First we discover they regularly consume dangerous stimulants, and now we learn they deliberately seek out life-threatening situations for enjoyment. What kind of species are we dealing with?" The footage continued to play, showing humans participating in something called an X Games. People were doing impossible flips on motorcycles, skating down steep ramps, and performing aerial acrobatics that defied both gravity and common sense. "There's more," Park added reluctantly. "They even have something called extreme ironing, where they do dangerous activities while ironing clothes. It seems they turned making dangerous activities even more dangerous into a form of humor." Officer Hand shook her head in disbelief. "How has this species survived? By all logical calculations, they should have gone extinct from their own reckless behavior." "Perhaps," Commander Hume mused, "this is why they've advanced so quickly in some areas. They appear to have no fear of failure or death. They see impossible challenges and decide to attempt them anyway." The command center continued to monitor the humans' dangerous activities, adding each new discovery to their growing list of reasons why Earth needed to be approached with extreme caution. A species that treated death-defying acts as entertainment was clearly unpredictable and potentially dangerous. "Update the contact protocols," Commander Yoon ordered. "Any civilization that views near-death experiences as recreational activities requires special handling. We can't apply our normal first contact procedures to a species that jumps off mountains for fun." As the crew returned to their duties, they couldn't help but wonder what other surprising behaviors they would discover about these strange, thrill-seeking humans. The galaxy had never seen anything quite like them before. #The real reason aliens hide from Earth. Entertainment analyst Song stood before the gathered officers in the ship's main briefing room. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to present her weekly report on human entertainment habits. After 3 months of studying human media, she still couldn't believe what she had discovered. "Distinguished colleagues," she began, activating the holographic display. "What I'm about to show you challenges everything we understand about psychological well-being and entertainment." The room darkened as Song played her first example, a human entertainment product called The Walking Dead. The assembled aliens watched in horror as humans on the screen ran from other humans who appeared to be dead but still moving. "This is one of their most popular forms of entertainment," Song explained. "They call it a zombie apocalypse. Humans imagine scenarios where their own species becomes infected and turns against each other. And they watch this for fun." "There must be some mistake," Medical Officer Kim interrupted. "Perhaps these are training simulations for possible biological warfare." "No," Song shook her head. "These are pure entertainment. They call them horror movies and thrillers. Look at this data." She brought up charts showing human brain activity while watching these programs. They deliberately seek out content that triggers their fear response. Their hearts race, their adrenaline spikes, and they enjoy it. Commander Yoon leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing on the data. "Show us more examples." Song played clips from various horror movies. The aliens watched as humans sat in dark rooms, voluntarily exposing themselves to stories about ghosts, monsters, killers, and supernatural threats. Many of these humans were even eating snacks while watching these terrifying scenes. "They have entire buildings dedicated to showing these fear-inducing stories," Song continued. "They call them movie theaters." Humans gather in large groups to be frightened together. They even bring their young sometimes, their offspring. Officer Hand's scales turned pale. They expose their children to these horrors. They have special categories of horror for different age groups, Song explained. They call them ratings. But that's not the most disturbing part. Look at this. She played footage from something called an amusement park haunted house. The aliens watched as humans paid money to walk through dark buildings where other humans in costumes jumped out to scare them. They're paying to be frightened. Commander Yoon asked in disbelief. Exactly, Song nodded. And there's more. They have entertainment about alien invasions where their entire planet is destroyed. They imagine their own extinction in countless ways. Nuclear war, climate disaster, pandemic diseases, robot uprisings. They call it post-apocalyptic entertainment. The briefing room erupted in confused murmurs. Officer Kim raised a hand. But how does imagining their own destruction provide entertainment? They claim it helps them face their fears, Song replied. They say it's cathartic. Some even say it helps them sleep better at night. But it gets stranger. She showed clips from roller coaster cameras, capturing humans screaming in terror and delight as they plunge down steep drops. They combine physical danger with emotional fear. They scream, their bodies release stress hormones, and then they immediately get back in line to do it again. Are there any forms of entertainment they enjoy that don't involve fear or danger? Commander Yoon asked. Yes, Song answered. They also have something called comedy where they laugh at their own misfortunes, and romance where they explore emotional pain, and drama where they deliberately make themselves sad. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These humans weren't just physically reckless, as they had discovered earlier. They also sought out emotional and psychological distress for entertainment. One final observation, Song added. During their holiday called Halloween, they dress up as the things they fear most and give candy to children. They turn their fears into celebrations. Commander Yoon stood up, his tail twitching thoughtfully. So let me understand this correctly. Humans create simulated versions of their worst nightmares, pay money to experience them, share them with their offspring, and consider this a normal form of entertainment. Correct, Song confirmed. And they're constantly creating new ways to frighten themselves. They have virtual reality horror games now, interactive fear experiences, and something particularly bizarre called escape rooms where they pay to be locked up and must solve puzzles to avoid simulated death. The briefing room buzzed with concerned discussion. A species that not only faced its fears, but actively sought them out for fun was unprecedented in galactic history. Update the observation protocols, Commander Yoon ordered. Any species that turns its own extinction into entertainment requires careful study. We clearly don't understand how their minds work. As the officers filed out of the briefing room, Song remained behind, staring at the frozen image of humans laughing as they left a horror movie theater. What kind of beings could find joy in fear itself? The galaxy, it seemed, wasn't ready for such psychological complexity. The real reason aliens hide from Earth. Military observer Choi stood at attention in the high-security briefing chamber of the observation vessel. The walls displayed multiple holographic screens showing different military installations from around Earth. After 6 months of observing human military activities, he had finally compiled enough data to make his report. Commander, Choi began, his voice grave. What I'm about to share may change our entire understanding of human behavior. Their approach to military preparation is unlike anything we've seen in any other species. Commander Yoon and the other senior officers sat forward as Choi brought up his first set of images. They showed various military bases around Earth, all of them buzzing with activity. These humans, Choi continued, are officially at peace with each other. Their major nations haven't engaged in full-scale warfare for over 70 years. Yet observe their activities. The screens showed soldiers running through obstacle courses, tanks performing maneuvers, and aircraft conducting mock battles. In one image, soldiers were practicing urban warfare in a specially constructed fake city. They're training for war during peacetime, Officer Han asked, her scales shifting color in confusion. Not just training, Choi corrected. They're preparing for every possible type of conflict imaginable. Look at this. He switched to footage of a military exercise called Red Flag. Fighter jets from different nations engaged in complex aerial combat scenarios, all while using expensive live ammunition. But why waste resources like this during peace? Commander Yoon asked, his four eyes blinking in sequence. Because they believe peace is temporary, Choi explained. They have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. They spend enormous amounts of money and resources preparing for conflicts that might never happen. The next series of images showed something even more bizarre. Military personnel sitting at computers, playing what appeared to be games. They call these war games and combat simulations, Choi explained. They create virtual scenarios of every possible type of conflict. Nuclear war, biological warfare, cyber attacks, alien invasions. They prepare for everything. Alien invasions, Officer Kim interrupted. But they haven't even confirmed the existence of alien life. Exactly, Choi nodded grimly. They prepare for threats that don't even exist yet. They have entire departments dedicated to imagining new types of warfare. The screens now showed various military research facilities. Scientists in laboratories worked on new weapons, defensive systems, and something particularly worrying called cyber warfare. They've even created a new battlefield in their computer networks, Choi continued. They attack each other's systems in controlled exercises, preparing for a type of war that would have been impossible just decades ago. Commander Yoon rose from his seat and walked closer to the screens. Show me their worst-case scenario preparations. Choi brought up files marked Doomsday Preparations. The aliens watched in silence as images of underground bunkers, emergency broadcast systems, and stockpiles of supplies filled the screens. Some of their governments have extensive plans for scenarios like nuclear war, global pandemics, or complete societal collapse, Choi explained. They call it continuity of government. They've built secure facilities deep underground, stocked with years of supplies. And all this, Commander Yoon clarified, is being done while they're at peace. Yes, Choi confirmed. But here's what's truly fascinating. They incorporate these preparations into their entertainment as well. He showed clips from military movies and video games. They turn their war preparations into popular culture. Their young people play games simulating combat before they're old enough to join the actual military. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. A species that never stopped preparing for war, even in times of peace, was both impressive and terrifying. There's one more thing, Choi added. They conduct these exercises with potential enemies. Nations that distrust each other will still train together, sharing military knowledge and techniques. They call it building trust through strength. Commander Yoon paced the room, his tail swishing thoughtfully. So they prepare for war to maintain peace, train with their enemies to build trust, and imagine conflicts that don't exist yet, just to be ready. Correct, Choi replied. They have a concept called deterrence. They believe that being visibly prepared for war makes war less likely to happen. The commander stopped pacing and faced his officers. Update our contact protocols immediately. Any species that maintains this level of military readiness during peacetime must be approached with extreme caution. Sir, Officer Han spoke up. Should we be concerned about their preparations for alien contact? They seem to be expecting conflict. No, Commander Yoon replied after a moment's thought. Their constant preparation isn't about expectations. It's about possibilities. They prepare for everything because they believe anything is possible. As the briefing concluded, the aliens couldn't help but admire the human capacity for preparation, even as it terrified them. A species that treated peace as a time to prepare for war was either incredibly wise or deeply paranoid. Possibly both. The observation ship continued its silent watch, now paying special attention to the endless war games playing out on the planet below, where humans practiced fighting enemies that didn't exist, preparing for wars they hoped would never come. Hashtag, the real reason aliens hide from Earth. Technical Officer Kang had spent the last year analyzing human space technology and their plans for future exploration. Today, he had finally finished his comprehensive report, and what he discovered had him deeply troubled. He made his way to the command center, where Commander Yoon and other senior officers had gathered for the emergency briefing. The command center hummed with the soft sounds of advanced technology as Kang connected his data pad to the main display system. The holographic screens came to life, showing detailed analyses of human space programs. "Commander," Kang began, his voice shaking slightly, "I've confirmed something that seems impossible. The humans are actively planning interstellar travel." Commander Yoon's scales turned a pale shade of gray as he read through the initial data. "They're planning to do what he exclaimed, his four eyes widening in disbelief. "Let me show you their current plans," Kang said, bringing up images of human spacecraft designs. "They're developing what they call generation ships, vessels designed to carry humans across interstellar distances." Officer Han studied the designs with growing horror. "But these ships, they're missing critical safety systems. Where's the radiation shielding, the artificial gravity, the temporal stabilizers?" "They don't have that technology yet," Kang explained, bringing up more detailed schematics. "They're planning to use primitive radiation shielding that would only partially protect them. They want to create artificial gravity through rotation, which would be incredibly inefficient and dangerous. And they have no concept of temporal stabilization at all." "But that's suicide," Han exclaimed, her scales flickering with distress. "The cosmic radiation alone would cause severe genetic damage over multiple generations, and without proper gravitational control, their bodies would deteriorate during long-term space travel." Kang nodded grimly. "They know these risks. Their scientists have calculated the potential problems. They've published papers about the dangers. And yet," he paused, bringing up more documents, "they're going to do it anyway." Commander Yoon leaned forward, studying the human plans carefully. "Show me their proposed timeline." The screen filled with various space agency schedules and project plans. Multiple countries and private companies were all working toward the same goal, reaching the stars. "They're not just planning this as a distant future project," Kang continued. "They're actively building prototypes. Look at this." He showed footage of rocket tests and space station construction. "They're testing new propulsion systems, developing life support technologies, and conducting biological experiments." Medical Officer Kim joined the discussion. "Their bodies aren't even adapted for space travel. They evolved in Earth's gravity. Their bones would weaken, their muscles would atrophy, their circulatory systems would struggle." "They know all this," Kang interrupted. "They've already experienced these problems in their primitive space stations. Their solution: exercise equipment and medical monitoring. They think they can overcome biological limitations through sheer determination." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't waiting until they had the proper technology. They were willing to risk everything just to reach the stars. "There's more," Kang added, his voice growing more concerned. "They're also developing something they call suspended animation, a way to basically freeze themselves for long journeys. The technology is completely untested for long-term use, but they're planning to use it anyway." Commander Yoon paced the room, his tail twitching nervously. "Show me their backup plans." "That's another disturbing aspect," Kang replied, bringing up more documents. "They have multiple approaches running simultaneously. If one plan fails, they'll try another. They're working on antimatter propulsion, fusion drives, solar sails, anything that might get them to the stars faster." "But why?" Officer Han asked. "Why not wait until they have the proper technology?" "Because they're impatient," Kang explained. They have this phrase they keep using in their documents. The stars are calling. They see interstellar travel as their destiny, regardless of whether they're ready for it or not. Commander Yoon stopped pacing and faced his crew. So let me understand this clearly. They're willing to risk multiple generations of their own species, facing unknown dangers and possibly fatal conditions, just to reach other stars. Yes, Kang confirmed. And they're excited about it. They have thousands of volunteers already signing up for potential missions. They're willing to leave Earth forever, face deadly radiation, live in cramped quarters, and risk their descendants' lives, all for the chance to see what's out there. The commander shook his head in amazement. Update the contact protocols immediately, he ordered. Any species willing to attempt interstellar travel before they're technologically ready is capable of anything. They're either the bravest or the most reckless beings we've ever encountered. As the briefing concluded, the alien observers continued to watch the humans' preparations with a mixture of horror and admiration. A species that would risk everything just to reach the stars was either incredibly foolish or remarkably brave, and none of them were quite sure which was true. The observation ship maintained its silent vigil, watching as humanity reached for the stars with inadequate technology, but unlimited determination. The galaxy, it seemed, wasn't ready for a species that refused to wait until they were ready. #The real reason aliens hide from Earth. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance was filled to capacity. Representatives from over 3,000 advanced civilizations had gathered for this historic meeting. The massive circular room glowed with soft blue light, and the air hummed with translated conversations in thousands of languages. Elder Ba, the most respected member of the council, stood at the central podium. Her ethereal form shifted colors gently as she prepared to present the final assessment of Earth. Behind her, massive screens displayed images of human activities that had been collected over the past year. Commander Yoon sat among his fellow observers, his scales slightly on edge as he watched the gathered representatives. Many of them had already read his team's reports, and their reactions ranged from disbelief to genuine concern. Distinguished members of the Galactic Alliance, Elder Bai began, her voice carrying clearly through the universal translators. Today we must make a decision about Earth. After extensive observation and analysis, I must state what many of us find difficult to accept. Humans are, by any rational standard, completely insane. The chamber erupted in murmurs as Elder Bai activated the main display. Images began to play. Humans jumping from aircraft, drinking coffee, watching horror movies, conducting military exercises, and planning dangerous space missions. Consider the evidence, she continued. They willingly consume substances that alter their minds, not for medicine, but for pleasure. They call it coffee and drink it multiple times daily. They create artificial situations to frighten themselves and call it entertainment. They jump from high places with only thin fabric to slow their fall, and they call it fun. The screen showed more footage. Military training exercises, war games, and prototype spacecraft designs. Even in times of peace, they prepare constantly for war. They imagine every possible threat and create defenses against dangers that don't exist yet. And most concerning of all, they plan to explore space without proper safety measures, willing to risk entire generations just to satisfy their curiosity. Elder Bai paused, letting her words sink in. The chamber had grown completely silent. But this is not a testimony of their primitive nature, she clarified. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Humans have achieved remarkable technological progress in an incredibly short time. They've gone from simple flight to space exploration in less than a century. They've mapped their own genome while still burning fossil fuels. They've created quantum computers while still fighting wars with projectile weapons. The screens now showed human achievements, their medical advances, their scientific discoveries, their artistic creations. They are advancing faster than any species we've ever encountered, Elder Ba continued, and they're doing it in completely unpredictable ways. They don't follow the normal patterns of technological development. They make breakthrough discoveries in advanced physics while still struggling with basic social issues. Commander Yoon watched as his fellow representatives nodded in agreement. His year of observations had led him to the same conclusions. Therefore, Elder Bai announced, I propose we classify Earth as a Level X civilization, too unpredictable for contact. Not because they are dangerous, but because they are too different from anything we understand. They treat the impossible as a challenge. They see danger as entertainment. They face their fears by turning them into games. A low murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. All those in favor of classification Level X, please indicate now. The chamber lit up with thousands of affirmative signals. The vote was unanimous. It is decided, Elder Bai declared. Earth will remain uncontacted. We will continue to observe, but we will not interfere. Not because we fear them, but because the galaxy is not ready for a species that defies our understanding of what is possible. As the council members began to disperse, Commander Yoon remained in his seat, watching the final images of Earth rotating on the main screen. He couldn't help but wonder what humans would do if they knew the truth, that they were being avoided not because they were too primitive, but because they were too fearlessly ambitious for the galaxy's comfort. Fascinating creatures, aren't they? Elder Ba said, approaching him. Indeed, Yoon replied. Do you think we're making the right decision? For now, she nodded. But someday they will reach the stars on their own. And on that day, the galaxy will never be the same. The grand chamber slowly emptied, leaving just the rotating image of Earth on the main screen. A small blue planet whose inhabitants had managed to both terrify and impress the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, all without even knowing they were being watched.